1 Peter verses 1 through 6, starting with verse 1 and 2. Peter now goes back to the thought of the suffering of Jesus mentioned in verse 18. In order to encourage these believers who might very shortly have to suffer themselves. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh. No article or preposition occurs before either use of flesh in verse 1 or the use in 3:18. The context alone must determine the meaning. Arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. Arm, haplizomai, means to equip or outfit as one would outfit an army unit with the best possible weapons for a particular battle. The best weapon here would be the same mind, enoia, or view toward the suffering that Christ himself had. It was not that Christ enjoyed suffering, but he endured it in order to accomplish our salvation. The word for, hati in Greek, may indicate the content of the proper view towards suffering at the hands of sinful men, namely, that he hath suffered, hath ceased from sin. Greek perfect tense meaning to have truly stopped. That is the word eis in Greek, indicates the reason or purpose for so equipping oneself, that is, so that he need no longer live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. In the flesh, in verse 2, has a preposition which may mean among. Certainly that's the area where we have to make our biggest adjustment at the moment that we become a Christian. And then it continues probably in our daily walk to be the biggest adjustment we must make each day. We do have a tendency to become angered. We do have a tendency to look lustfully at things we're not supposed to be looking at lustfully, and a variety of different sins, and we could run the whole pantheon of them, and we're not going to. No sense triggering anybody. So in verse 3, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. This might be translated, you have already spent too much time thinking like Gentiles, living in licentiousness, passion, parties, carousing, drinking, and meaningless idolatry. Verse 4, wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them. Peter's readers were, of course, Gentiles, and had lived like Gentiles all their lives. Their salvation and conversion to Christianity was much more profound than we can imagine today. It is no wonder that the companions of these people were surprised when they no longer continued to live in sin. Speaking evil of you, blasphemia, since they were unable to understand the Christians, they abused them. Verses 5 through 6, who shall give account? There will come a time when they shall have to settle up with God, who is ready to judge the quick, that means living, and the dead. For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead. The word preach, euangelitzomai, here is different than in 3:18. Euangelistai means specifically to evangelize. Some believe that the phrase the dead means that they are dead when Peter writes, but were alive when the gospel was preached to them. Others see this as a reference to being dead in trespasses and sin. One thing we do know is that the Bible does not teach that men have a second chance to be saved after death. There are no second chances in that one arena. That they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. If this refers to the opportunity these Gentiles had to be saved while they were still alive, we might rephrase it. They had a choice between human condemnation by wicked men or divine life by the Spirit. This interpretation at least allows a consistent meaning throughout the passage for flesh and spirit. Christians' conduct through suffering, chapter 4, verses 7 through 19, starting with 7. But the end of all things is at hand. As he continues to develop the theme of the Christian attitude towards suffering, Peter wishes now to re-emphasize the positive elements of the Christian life in light of the consummation of all things. At hand, engizo, is in the perfect tense of Greek and emphasizes the certainty of the nearness of the end. Although this word is used only once in Peter, it was a frequent topic in the apostolic preaching and in the preaching of Jesus and John the Baptist. An equivalent statement in James 5:8 says that the parousia of the Lord is very near. Verse 8, have fervent charity means, of course, warm love toward each other as Christian brothers. It has nothing to do with either giving money as a contribution or the slippery formal outward courtesy of good culture. Charity shall cover the multitude of sins. Peter draws support from the Greek Old Testament with the quotation of Proverbs 10:12, which simply means that if a person has true love for others, his shortcomings will not be obvious. Verses 9 through 11, hospitality without grudging. Gangismas is easily understood if difficult to perform. Hospitality, again, should not be confused with courtesy, which is far less costly. Because of the separation of verses in our Bible, it is easy to overlook the fact that verses 10 and 11 are an exposition of love and hospitality in verses 8 and 9. As every man hath received the gift, charisma, does not refer to talents, nor does the word have the article in the original. Not the gift, but any gift, meaning something one gets for nothing, is to be given in the same way that it is received without grudging. This is the thing that makes us good stewards of God's grace. Minister the same one to another. In this context means being hospitable to one another. In the early church, apostles and preachers were constantly traveling from one town to another, spreading the gospel. In this type of ministry, they needed someone to minister to them in return by providing the physical necessities of life. The gospel came as a free gift, so should the support of the gospel preachers. In this passage, both the preaching of the message of the gospel and ministering to the physical needs of the preachers through genuine Christian hospitality are to be done to glorify God in the name of Jesus Christ. 12 through 13, verses 12 and 13. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you. It is possible that the Amen of verse 11 was an attempt to close the letter, and Peter may have just now heard of some new development in which some of his readers are involved. If not, then he feels that he needs to say a bit more about the attitude of a Christian towards suffering. Either way, fiery trial need not refer to literal fire like that in Rome in 64. The important thing here is to note how they are to look upon whatever trial it is. They are not to consider it strange. Why me, Lord? You ever felt like that? Why, Lord, are you doing this to me? Why, Lord, are you allowing this to happen to me? Go pick on somebody else, would you, Lord, please, for a few moments? Frankly, sometimes we feel like that. We do. I certainly hear these kinds of things a lot. 3 words for joy are used to emphasize true happiness. Then in the revelation of Christ, they will be able to be glad also with exceeding joy. 3 words for joy are used to emphasize true happiness at his coming, and the translations are necessarily awkward at expressing this. Verse 14, if he be reproached, anaidizo, is present tense and literally, if you are being reproached. The word denotes heaping insults upon a person. The reproach here is caused by confessing the name. The apodosis of the sentence implies you are really fortunate, that is, according to the teachings of Christ in Christianity. Happy are ye. The reason they should consider themselves fortunate is because of the presence of the Spirit, which is a sign of the approval, blessing, and protection of God. The Spirit of glory and of God. Glory may be an allusion to the Shekinah glory cloud of the Old Testament. Verses 15 and 16, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody. Peter again returns to this truth mentioned before in 2:20 and 3:17 to show that it is not suffering in itself which is virtuous, but suffering for the name of the Lord, or as a Christian, which counts. None of his readers should suppose that just punishment for sin by the government would bring the praise of God. The name Christian was applied in New Testament times as a term of derision. Just being a Christian was at times punishable by death or lesser penalties. History indicates that many have been killed for admitting to being Christians in these times of persecution by the government. Let him not be ashamed, that is, of this name of being a Christian. Let him rather be proud of it and use this derogatory name as a means and instrument for bringing glory to God. For the time has come. The word time, kairos, refers to a specific designated or predicted time when something is supposed to happen. Peter is again making reference to the end time. These verses are an apocalyptic pronouncement with application from the persecution which is beginning to come upon believers. One of the elements of apocalyptic discourse is judgment, krima. Notice the word crime in there? The meaning here would be rather general, the same as suffering or punishment. The application is that if in the end time judgment and punishment are to come, and we are now beginning to see suffering and punishment for being a Christian of the people of God, this is the beginning of the house of God. This must mean that the end of time is here, or at least very close. What shall the end be? That is what will happen most certainly before this is all over. To them that obey not the gospel of God. There is obviously no doubt at all about what will happen to them. They will be judged, and all the end times predictions about God's wrath upon his enemies will be fulfilled. Peter is attempting to encourage the believer to gladly face any danger or suffering for Christ by appealing to the apocalyptic comfort that God will punish the ungodly in that day. He quotes Proverbs 11:31, if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? In summary of this section, Peter exhorts, let them that suffer. The Greek present tense implies the suffering may have already begun. Commit, paradidomi. It is interesting that this is the same word used in 2:23 to describe what Jesus did in his suffering for our sins on the cross. He committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Compare Luke 23 and 46, where Jesus committed his spirit to God, and Acts 7:59, where Stephen prayed in his martyrdom for the Lord Jesus to receive his spirit. This may be an encouragement to bravery in martyrdom if it becomes inevitable, rather than telling Christians to pray for deliverance. The Christian and the coming of the Lord. Now we move into chapter 5, verses 1 through 9. Exhortation to the elders, verses 1 through 4. The elders which are among you I exhort, The elders, presbyteros, are not a group in any one place, since this is a circular letter intended for several different congregations, but probably individuals who have been appointed by the apostles in various cities. Elder, as the title for an office, has nothing to do with age, but respect, which originally came from age. Peter issues a special exhortation for these spiritual leaders, and to make it more effective, he includes himself in the exhortation, who am also an elder. The original has the compound word symbresbuteros, which means an elder serving along with you who are elders. Peter is also a witness of the sufferings of Christ. The word witness, martis, is the word from which we get the English word martyr, but denotes here a person who testifies to the truth of something. A witness of the sufferings of Christ, then, does not mean someone who has necessarily seen the sufferings, but someone who testifies to the truth and meaning of what happened. The apostles were all witnesses in the sense that they affirmed Jesus to be the suffering servant of Jesus Christ, of Jehovah, who, according to the Old Testament, was to accomplish the salvation of God's people. Peter learned this himself, and was now an authoritative preacher of the sufferings of Christ. It should be noted that the prophets had the Spirit's witness of the sufferings of Christ long before anyone had seen these sufferings. And also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. A partaker, koinonos, is one who shares in something, or is a partner in it. It is not likely that Peter would call himself a partner in something that was not yet revealed. It may be that he means to say that he is a partner in the great glory of salvation, which was revealed partially to the prophets and now had already been fulfilled in his time. See again chapter 1 verses 3 through 12, and note especially verse 111 concerning the glory that was to follow the sufferings of Christ according to the prophets. Shall be, mellow, is a present participle in the original, which might be better translated the glory that was to be revealed, meaning the prophesied blessing of salvation to the Gentiles. Note in this connection Acts 2:39 from the preaching of Peter at Jerusalem. The content of Peter's exhortation to the elders is expressed in the first word of verse 2, feed the flock of God. This one word sums up the total pastoral responsibility to the flock or congregation. The word feed, poimaino, is a cognate of flock, poimnion, and is especially important because of the biblical metaphor of the people of God as a flock and their spiritual leaders as shepherds, poimain. The responsibilities of the shepherds or elders, the terms are synonymous, are many, but are quite obvious from this metaphor of tending the flock. And compare those references. The shepherd has the total responsibility for the care and welfare of the flock. He does not just feed. This basic concept has come down to the present day in the word pastor, from the Latin pasere, which means feed. Peter defines his exhortation to the elders with 3 sets of negative and positive words. 2 sets of words deal with how to pastor as far as the pastor's attitude is concerned, while the 3rd set deals with how to pastor as far as the method is concerned. Not by constraint, but willingly. It means that the pastor or elder is called to this vocation. He does not need to be pressed into it, for he feels called, he wants to do it. This is the proper attitude for the pastor today as well. He should enjoy his work, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Filthy lucre Iskrikerdos, is an adverb from two words meaning shameful gain. Since the word is used only one time in all Christian literature, it is difficult to determine its precise meaning, but we know that its opposite here is of a ready mind, prothemos, which means eagerly. The passage does not say that there is something wrong with money or with the pastor getting paid. The Bible clearly teaches that pastors should be paid at least as well as other professional people. The pastor or elder should not choose this vocation just because it is such a lucrative occupation. Fortunately, there is no danger of this today, however, but should be eager to do it. The third set of words, neither as being lords over God's heritage but being examples to the flock, has to do with method of ministry. Another translation has not as domineering over those in your charge. The idea is that there is to be no browbeating, whip cracking, or intimidation. Peter refers to the second coming of Christ as the manifestation of the chief shepherd, when the shepherds will be rewarded with a glorious and unfading crown. Exhortation to the younger. Chapter 5, verses 5 through 9. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Both words are in the plural. The younger men likewise have an exhortation from Peter. It is to submit, hupatasso, to the elders. For the meaning of, see that reference, for the meaning of this word, which here implies that the younger men, the elders or pastors, as well as all Christians in general, in this text, the congregation, must fit themselves into the social structure, here the church, and do their part. The elders are not told to submit because they are the leaders, but it is implied that they should submit to the chief shepherd. Be clothed with humility. The word be clothed and kamboomai means literally to tie on an apron. Here the thing to be tied on is humility, which is the same word used by Peter in 3:8 in the same close connection with the word submit. Humility is simply assuming the proper role in relationship to others. Again, Peter draws upon the Old Testament to prove his point by quoting Proverbs. Our particular congregation, we have a lead pastor and we have 7 other associate pastors, of which I am one. Ultimately, the lead pastor is the one that has the authority. He's the one that writes the checks for the various different things, not for our payment. So, because there's only three are paid, most of us are not, which is fine. But he is our authority. If he tells me he wants something done and it has to do with the church, I pretty much have an obligation to do that. And fortunately, I think I've told this to you in the past. He's 12 years. I've never said the exact number of years, but he's 12 years younger than me. And you know, normally an older person would not really feel all that subject to a younger person. Military is a little different because a first and second lieutenant outranks any enlisted person right off the bat, regardless of how old they are. But I don't have any problem following this man's leadership because he hasn't. He has been truly anointed of God. He knows exactly how to be a pastor. It doesn't mean he's perfect. Doesn't mean he don't make mistakes. One of the roles that I have within the hierarchy is to be the one that pings him when he errs. You know, just brings the issue up to him if there is one, and it doesn't happen very often. Early on it did. But anyway, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Due time, kairos, sounds like by and by or after.
Whoa.
Okay. that little scream, I kind of lost my place. Okay. All right, humility is simply assuming the proper role in relationship to, and I said that already. Humble yourselves, therefore, and then by and by, hold on, getting there. But the word really means a specific and designated time. Here it refers to God's time, namely the second coming of Christ, and more precisely at the revelation. Humble, synonymous with humility and submit above, is the opposite of exalt. It means literally think low. But in actual usage in the Bible, it does not gender a lack of self-confidence or a low self-image. Humility in the Bible, in fact, is an attitude that will bolster and support self-confidence, for it simply means assuming the role that God has assigned to us in life. True humility does not say, I'm no good, I can't. It says, this is what God wants me to do, I will. Another reason why I didn't want to become a Christian. Because I never envisioned myself standing here or places like this or going places where Christian people go. I now find that very much fun. Casting all your care, in verse 7. Humility means that we do not have to bear our anxieties. We are told to toss them over to Him. Casting is a participle of attendant circumstance, which assumes the imperative character of the main verb here. Two words for care in verse 7 must be distinguished. The first means anxieties. The second refers to the meticulous personal concern God has about us. He is interested in us and willing to carry all our anxieties if we are willing to do what He wants us to do. If we are willing to do what He wants us to do. If we're not, you should expect that your life will not be as comfortable as it otherwise could be. Several summary exhortations are now given. Be sober is nearly the same in meaning as be vigilant. The devil is pictured as a prowling lion who is seeking someone to devour. The mention of suffering twice in the context indicates that the devil is to be blamed for it, but is to be resisted with strong faith. So in conclusion, in the Roman numeral chapter 8 there, chapter 5, verses 10 through 14, verses 10 and 11 are more than a doxology and close. They are a great encouragement to these suffering saints. They promise that God will Himself make you perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle the faithful. 12:14, by Silvanus probably indicates the secretary. Remember I used the word amanuensis before? Who wrote for Peter. Note that he is a faithful brother, a preacher in his own right, and companion of Paul for some time. The purpose is restated to encourage and testify, that is solemnly affirm, that this is the true grace. Note that he means by grace the whole system of Christianity. Greetings are included from the church, implied by the feminine form of elected together at Rome, which here has the symbolic name of Babylon. How about that? You ever thought about Rome as symbolic of Babylon? Perhaps we should. As we go through our Christian walk, we're going to have difficulties. There are going to be times in our lives that are so exceptionally frustrating that we don't know how we're going to get through the day, and I think we've all participated in those, and if you haven't, you should expect it. The big thing is that we must know that God's going to get us through it. He's going to carry us through it. He knows exactly what's happening in our lives. If things aren't going the way we expect them to go, perhaps it's because we are not going the way we're expected to go. We need to take a good hard look at that. Part of the way I do ministry, or if you will, how I work with my ministry, I try to avoid the judgmentalism thing. I think I've told you guys in the past, one of my larger papers that I had to, in fact, my largest paper that I ever had to write was on judgmentalism. Is it ever proper for a Christian to be judgmental? And the short answer to that is yes. And then I use the example of somebody walks up to me and I'm looking at the barrel of a .38 pistol pointed at me and they say, I want your money or I'm going to blow you away. I make a judgment that the person's probably pretty serious about that. And maybe make my decision based on that, whether I want to give him the money, whether I want to resist him, whether I think I'm Captain America and can kill him before he kills me. I'm definitely not in jeopardy of that part of it anyway. But, you know, there have been times in my life, and since when I retired from the military, didn't have a really very good job. It was a nice sort of a nice industry. I worked for my sister-in-law to sell insurance, and the company for which she worked offered an intern program where I could go learn how to be an insurance agent, have my own office, and basically have my own what they call book of business. Long story short, I failed miserably at that. I'm not an entrepreneur. Somebody walks in and they want an insurance quote and they tell me they're from X company. My response is, we're not going to be able to beat that one at any cost. That's not how you do business. And I wasn't yet a Christian. I don't know whether I was a Christian. No, I wasn't a Christian then. I didn't have any kind of an ethical thing where I felt like I needed to tell them to fudge a few things here or there. But the net result was that I failed. And so they had to release me. I don't really think of it as a firing because the contract was pretty clear. If I do very, very good, they're going to take care of the expenses for a full 18-month period of time. They're going to take care of all the expenses that I would normally have if I were in business for myself. Well, I failed at that. And I don't regret it. I'm glad I did. Never liked that kind of work anyway. I don't even like paying for insurance, frankly. But during that period of time, they also asked me if I could continue to work for the company to keep the storefront open because we had rented the store. We did all the signage and everything else that said name of company and all these other things. They wanted to get another agent to go in there, so they asked me if I'd be willing to work for $1,000 a month. Well, $1,000 a month versus no dollars a month was a lot. And you know, and I had some military retirement and whatever else, but I also had a mortgage, and the mortgage took care of the would have taken care of the the military pay would have taken care of the mortgage each month, but circumstances came around, my bills started getting in arrears, I started cutting back on my insurance payments or my homeowners payments, and we went into foreclosure. We actually went into foreclosure. They had a sheriff's sale on my door on a Friday for a sale that was going to be conducted on Monday of the house in which I'm living. Hard time. Very hard time. Tossed and turned, couldn't sleep, agonizing, like the dickens over it. My sister-in-law came up with a program over the weekend where I was able to get that house refinanced at a lower rate and everything else and stop the foreclosure action. It's pretty amazing. But my point about that is I was agonizing. Do you know, since I became a Christian, I have not laid in bed agonizing over something that just happened and is going to flow into my tomorrow when I wake up. I don't do that at all. I have the capacity just because I'm a Christian. It's God's going to work it out. You know? Sometimes I even thought, well, maybe he'll just take me home while I sleep, you know? I know better than that, because if he took me home while I was sleeping, my wife would have a mess in terms of our finances and everything else to take care of. But too often, and I run into this a lot, and if any of you do this, stop it. The past, it's gone. It's gone. Everything that I've said today is already said. I can't change anything that I said, and they got me on this infernal video thing here as well anyway, so it's hard for me to retract anything that I may have said. But I don't live there anymore. I live for the now and the future. What is the now and the future of our lives? So if any of you are agonizing over your past, if any of you are thinking that I'm this or I'm that or I'm this, that's exactly what that thing was, that chapter is speaking about. It is speaking about don't live in the past. I so often I have to say that to people, you know. As soon as they meet me, they want to start telling me about all the difficulty that they have, or have had rather. And eventually I get the conversation turned around to, okay, so what can you do about all that has happened right now? Can you change any of it? Can you go back and do a redo? No. What can you take out of that you can bring forward and use in today's time? For me, I had to get another job. $1,000 a month wasn't cutting it. And I did get a job, and ironically, that job was, you'll love this, I actually worked for the Ventura County Sheriff's Department in their crime laboratory. Not that I was a forensic toxicologist or any of the other kind of stuff. I was a clerk, a very low-level clerk. I was the second lowest ranking clerk in the entire Sheriff's Department, as a matter of fact. But it was more than $1,000 a month. And the county, because it's county government, I had some benefits and whatever else that came its way. And then from there, things started moving along. And now I'm not rich. Don't think I want to be rich, because I have some relatives that are very rich, and yeah, seriously, you know, pretty comfortable with what I got. Like it to be better, but I could be the vehicle for the change for all of that. If I want to be better, I could go out and get a part-time job or something like that. I could even go back to my congregation and ask them to reinstate $500 a month stipend. For me, the stipend was a difficulty, so I had to stop that. I felt like I had to stop it because it was costing me more money in taxes. But my life pattern has been established, and what I do is ministry. And ministry is what occupies a good bit of my time. Not so much that it takes away from the family time. The wife works outside the home, and I'm trying to get her to quit working outside the home. But all in all, the Lord's been good to me. And the Lord's been good to me because I had a calling. I had a calling to become a pastor, and it started very shortly after, or even shortly before, I started going to the Channel Islands Bible College and Seminary with Dr. Welch. That incidentally was the first set of classes that I ever went to willingly. I really wanted to go to classes there. Never before in my life did I take a college level class that I wanted to take. I was trying to get ahead and whatever else. So it's a good thing. So your circumstances shouldn't define you. But you can have some control over your circumstances simply by following the will of God. And if you don't know what the will of God is for your life, ask. Ask. I know in this classroom they probably taught about the permissive will of God, the perfect will of God, and the overruling will of God, whether they use those terms or not. He'll let you mess up if you really want to do that. He'll let you. And some of you, frankly, are living testimonies to that. Some of us. I'm not excluding myself from that group. I just don't happen to be in the same set of circumstances you were, but I've certainly talked to you about how many times I should have been court-martialed while I was in the military and never was. I was always the fair-haired kid, despite the stupidity of some things that I've done. Coming to work drunk after a 3-day drinking binge that stopped at 7 o'clock in the morning when I had to be at work at 8. It's a good thing I had an alcoholic for a supervisor. It helped. It helped. He didn't give me pity, but you know, anybody ever had the dry heaves? Oh, they hurt. Don't they hurt? This guy actually went to the latrine with me and held my back and held my chest and gave me compressions while I was doing this, because that helps a lot. But never got nailed for it. Never got in trouble for it. That's a court-martial offense. That's a felony level offense in the military. You pick up a DUI in the military, you're generally you're toast. Now I never got a DUI because I didn't have a car. Thank goodness for that. So the Lord protected me way back when. So I'm going to go ahead and close a few minutes early today. I don't know what time I usually close anyway, but I definitely get you out of here before 12. What? I've done that before. Well, I'm going to close at 18 minutes before. Somebody close. Oh. Yes, you got to close.
Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us.